and welcome to our video about forward rolls. We're going to start with the safety considerations. When you're spotting a child, make sure that you're able to support them at the hips so you can lift them off their head or neck immediately if necessary. You do want them to stay in a tuck position. You want to make sure their chin is on their leotard and their head is straight down, so you don't want their head turned to either side, and you want to make sure they're rolling on the back of their head.
Go.
Okay, this is how we spot a rock and roll. As you can see she's sitting on her bottom and she's giving her legs a hug. Her hands are on her shins and her chin is down. She's going to keep her chin down, and I'm going to support her through her back and kind of hold her feet. Remind her to stay in a tuck and rock back and up and back and up. So I'm supporting her neck and head so that it doesn't whip back, and then I'm helping her up. Let's try again. Ready? Back and up. Again, back and up. Good job. Thanks, Chloe. All right, you can stop, right? So when you start to teach the forward roll, some of the cue words that you're going to use for your students are you're going to say feet together, and you want to check to make sure their feet are together and their big toes are lined up. Then you tell them to bend their knees and put their hands on the floor, look at their tummy, and then roll, reach, and they're reaching forward and upward, and then stretch, ta-da. In the video that you're about to see, you're going to see some forward roll practices, and you'll notice that I kind of talk about how she tends to rush through her skill a little bit. So a forward roll at first should show some control, and then after that there's some things that we do with the block to make sure that she's reaching forward and stretching. So you can use a block or something in front of them. You can also put yourself in front of them once you know that they're rolling safely. And you can have them reach for you because they love doing that. So they reach for your hands, and then you hold hands and stretch their arms up into the sky. So that's a fun way to do it. That's fine. Okay, and this is how we're going to spot a forward roll. We tell them to start with their feet together. They can bend their knees to put their hands down on the floor, and then we help them tuck their head and roll, stay in a ball, reach, and stretch. All right, we're going to try it again for a student that's maybe a little more advanced or has a better rolling concept. Feet together, hands down, look at your tummy, roll, and you can grab this arm to help them stand up and stretch to remind them that their arms come up with them. Then there's another thing you can do. Already stand here. And this one's a little trickier because you've got to have to gauge kind of their ending. But they're going to go feet together, back up just a little. They're going to roll, and then they're going to reach for the red block and stand up, stretch. Okay, the block was a little too close. She's going to try it again. Stretch up, hands down. Still a little too close, but that's one thing you can do to help them think of reaching forward and standing up tall. You can pause it for a second, please. Okay. All right, now this is something you can do if you have a student that's having a hard time getting up at the end of their forward roll. You start them up on a panel mat, and Cordy, move up just a little, I think. There you go. Okay, so she's going to stretch up tall, hands down. She's going to roll, tuck her head, reach, and stretch. So you see the panel mat gave her some lift so she could get up off the floor very easily. Cordy, let's do that again. And we'll see if we can grab the block this time. Back up this, there you go. Good job. Hands down, roll, reach, and stretch. That was very nice. Okay, let's slow down one more and look at it, because I think she's putting her head outside of her hands instead of in close to her toes. So let's see if she can fix that, and if she can slow her roll down, because she's not showing any control in her roll. So we want to slow her down. This is a controlled skill. Where did she roll? She rolled on the top of her head. So we're going to have her try it again, and make sure we see her roll on the back of her head. Scoot up just a little. Perfect. There she goes. And if you saw that time, her head was in closer to her feet than her hands were, and that's really important for a forward roll. So those are all things you can work on for your forward roll. Now we're going to take it to beam. And go, hands down, look at your tummy, roll, reach, and stretch. Okay, now that one was okay, but her feet crossed when she stood up. So let's try it again and keep her feet and knees glued together the whole time. Try again, Cordy. Hands down, look at your tummy, roll, reach, and stretch. Good job. Now let's try it with a beanbag. And in this next couple of videos, you're going to see some ways to make sure that their legs stay zipped up. So first you'll see beanbag between the knees, and then the ankles, and then both places. So a really good forward roll can keep them in both places. All right, here you're going to notice that Cordy has a beanbag between her knees, because one of the best ways to get your kids to keep their legs together is to put a beanbag between them. So I'm going to back up and we'll see if she can do a forward roll, reach and stretch with that, and give it a try. Hands down, look at your tummy, roll, reach, reach it. I can't believe that stayed in there. Okay, and then if you're really working with the child, you can put a beanbag between the knees and between the ankles to make sure all parts of the legs are zipped up and stay together. All right, I'm going to back up. All right, give it your best try. Okay, she's going to try again, and this time, even if they fall out, she's going to reach forward, stand up, stretch, and do her ta-da. Go ahead, Corey. Wow, that one was better. Good job. I don't have a video of this drill, but there are a couple ways to make sure that their chin is down. You can put a beanbag between their chin and their leotard, or some coaches like to ask them to bite their shirt or their leotard. And then if you have a child that likes to untuck, or sometimes we call it like a carpet roll, where they kind of let their legs roll out away from their tummy, if you have a child that does that, you can put a small stuffed animal between their knees or their thighs and their tummy, so they should be able to keep it in there, and then it shouldn't fall out until they stand up. So that's a fun thing to try. So this panel mat is one of our lead-ups to doing forward rolls on a balance beam. Obviously it's much wider, but same kind of thing. I come in here at her hip so I have control of her. I ask her to bend down, put her hands on the beam. She's going to put her head in as close as she can to her toes, and in order to do that, she's going to have to bend her arms, and she's going to roll, reach, and stretch. Okay, it's obviously easier here because she's got so much room, so much wide room. She's going to show it to you by herself. Go ahead, Grace. So if you have a child in your class that's really good at forward rolls, after they have them on the floor, anything you can do on the floor, you can do on a beam. So go ahead and stick them on a mat, and this carries over to any skill in gymnastics: bridges, cartwheels, handstands, backward rolls, cartwheels, all that stuff takes place on a panel mat to get them ready for beam. Thanks. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some cue words for beam, since we just practiced some beam stuff on a panel mat, and you can also use those cue words when you're doing that. You want to tell them the same thing: get their feet together and make sure their toes are lined up, their big toes. They bend their knees, and then they butterfly their hands out. So you say hands out there, and you check to make sure their thumbs are on top of the beam and their fingers are gripping the beam. You say head in, because you want their head in as close to their toes as possible with the back of their head on the beam, and you ask them to roll slowly. So you can kind of say one backbone or one vertebrae at a time, and you want to roll so slowly that you're almost done with your roll and your toes are still on the beam. So this one ends up kind of being like a tucked pike position. You want to keep reminding them to keep their elbows in and to keep holding on and squeezing the beam. For beginners, some people let them grab under the beam after they kind of start that roll. It's okay to do that. It's not ideal, but eventually you want to get to where they're just holding on to the beam. And then they're going to keep holding on to the top of that beam or under, if you let them do that, while their feet come to the beam. And then you want to be sure that they have their balance there, and then they can let go and sit up. and then straddle their feet behind, push their knees up onto the beam, and then stand up. Okay, this shows the beam setup for teaching your students forward rolls on a balance beam. You can see we have the soft mats going around the beam to protect them from the hardness of the beam, and we have panel mats stacked all the way up. What would make it even better would be if the panel mats were stacked all the way up to the top of the beam, so there was no room for them to fall to the side at all, but we'll go ahead and start with this. Okay, once you're taking it to the beam, there's some important things to make sure you teach your kids. One, the key phrase I always use is hands out, head in. So that's cueing them that their hands need to be farther away from them than their head is, so their head comes in close to their toes. I remind them to put their hands on top of the beam, so their thumbs are going to be up here on top of the beam with their fingers gripping the beam. I'm going to remind them to roll slowly and to keep their toes on the beam as long as possible, to stay in their tuck position. It's kind of like a little bit of an open tuck because you're wanting them to keep their toes on the beam for so long, and that their elbows should be squeezing their head as they roll, because those elbows kind of help guide them to keep them straight as they're rolling on the beam. So let's watch Cordy try all of that. She doesn't really like forward rolls, so she's a good demonstrator for what kids do when they're just learning them, because they can be a little bit scary. All right, so feet together. Okay, and you want to make sure that their feet are lined up. She shouldn't have one foot in front of the other at all, because then she's setting herself up for failure. She's going to go crooked. So she's got her hands out very nicely with her hands on top of the beam or her thumbs on top, and she's gripping the side. She can bend her knees and her arms to get her head on, and I'm going to tell her to roll really slow. Uh-oh, why are your ankles apart? Okay, so she's really slowly rolling. Elbows should be squeezing her head. I have her at her hips so I can help lift her if she starts to fall. She slowly comes down and I move my arm so she can put her feet on the beam. Okay? And then I can still hold her here and grab a hand, or she can grab my arm with both of her hands. Don't pull against me, reach and stand up. There you go. Good job. So now we're going to try it a little faster. All right, go ahead, Cordy. So that would be a very beginning one. You slow them down and give them all the cues as they go through it. Feet together. Look at your feet. Stretch up tall. Okay, hands go down on the beam. Bend. Okay, see how she's got her head in? That's really good. She's going to bend her elbows so her head can be on that. Uh-oh, do we kick off the beam or we roll? Elbows in. Elbows in. There. Oh, that was a nice one. Good. Feet on the beam. Okay, and I've still got her in case she's wobbly, then she can reach forward and stand up. Okay, now we're not super concerned about the finish of a forward roll on the beam, because to stand up with 2 feet like that is really, really hard. We're more concerned that she can do the roll and finish on top of the beam, even if it's just on her back, and then kind of get up any way she wants. If she could stand up with her feet together, that would be awesome. The progression from that would be eventually to remove these mats, but still to keep the soft mat on, and then from there to eventually taking this mat off of here. However, you don't just want to throw kids through it that can't do that, because it really hurts, especially on these old Nissen beams. It's kind of a hard edge, and so it hurts their back to keep rolling off the side of the beam. So that's not something you want them doing by themselves. You want this to be fun, and you don't want it to hurt them. So you want to continuously encourage them to do it in a place that's safe and fun for them. Okay, we're going to take it up onto a high beam next so that you can kind of see how it works up there. Okay, so Cordy's up on a higher beam, and this isn't something I'm going to have her do by herself until she can do like 99.9% of them and make them consistently. So she's going to start with her feet together, and I'm looking at her toes to make sure they're lined up. I have her stretch, because we always start everything in a stretch. Then I ask her to bend down, hands on the beam, head in. Okay, and I've got a good hold of her. Now, elbows, where should your elbows be? Good. Oh, she's not kicking off. She keeps her toes on as long as possible, rolling down her spine. I've got her hips here. She's going to keep holding on as she puts her feet on the beam, so now she feels pretty secure. She can grab my hands. Good. Good, so I can help her sit up. Then she can put her hands on the beam, feet behind, and stand up on the beam. Okay, so that's one way that she can do a forward roll on the beam. Go ahead and back up and we'll try again.
White.
You can pause it, Grace. Okay, stretch up tall. Hands on the beam, hands out, head in, bend. So your head's on the beam, go slow. Go slow, elbows in, elbows in. Good, because that helps you adjust back onto the beam. Okay, now you're gonna put your favorite foot on the beam and reach for me. And she's gonna just reach this way and stand up. Good job. She kind of did it on her opposite leg, but you can let them decide how they want to do that, but that's a really hard way to get up on the beam. So it's easier to let them sit up and straddle their legs behind and then stand up like she did the first time. All right, so that's forward rolls on beam.